Today, we are diving into the Renaissance. Now, looking at this timeline here from around 1350 to 1527, you might think it's just another standard history lesson. But stick with me. This is actually the story of how Europe woke up from a 1,000-year nap, looked around, and decided it was time to completely reinvent itself. It was a period of extraordinary cultural and intellectual growth. It kicked off in Italy during the 14th century and marked the big transition from the Middle Ages to the early modern era. Basically, it was Europe's ultimate glow-up. Now look at this painting on the right, the Ghent altarpiece. Notice how detailed it is. Before this, in the Middle Ages, human figures in paintings often looked a bit flat, like card cutouts. But the Renaissance introduced brand new ways of thinking about human potential. It spread from Florence, hit the rest of Italy, and eventually conquered all of Europe. It was kind of like a viral trend, but with a lot more oil paint. But why Italy? Why not somewhere else in Europe? Well, Italy had a few massive advantages going for it, including wealthy trading cities, a rich Roman heritage right in their backyard, and powerful families like the Medicis, who sponsored artists and scholars. Let's look at the artistic evolution on the screen. On the left, we have Giotto's late medieval masterpiece from 1310. It is beautiful, but notice how the background figures are tightly crowded together. Then, fast forward about a century to Masaccio's work on the right. Suddenly, we see realistic architecture, depth, and three-dimensional perspective. It completely changed how people viewed art. The word Renaissance literally means rebirth. It fundamentally changed how people thought, created, and learned across European society. This cultural movement built itself on 5 key characteristics that you can see at the bottom of the screen: humanism, realism in art, scientific observation, patronage, and classical learning. And speaking of realism, take a look at the portraits in the center. This is the famous diptych of Federico da Montefeltro and his wife, Battista Sforza. Federico actually lost his right eye in a tournament, which is why the artist painted him strictly from his left side. It turns out that finding your best angle for a portrait is definitely not a modern invention. They didn't hide flaws back then, they just worked around them. At the absolute center of all this change was an intellectual movement called Humanism. Basically, instead of focusing strictly on religious dogma, thinkers started asking what it actually means to be human and live in the present world. To answer that, they revived a curriculum known as the Studia Humanitatis, which focuses on 5 core subjects: poetry, grammar, history, moral philosophy, and rhetoric. They dug up ancient texts to learn how to reason using empirical evidence. On the right, you can see Raphael's famous fresco, The School of Athens, which beautifully visualizes this idea by imagining all the great ancient philosophers gathered together in one room, thinking, debating, and completely shaping the modern mind. One of the defining features of the Renaissance was the renewed study of the civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome. Scholars went on literal treasure hunts, searching for long-forgotten manuscripts to translate and study ancient philosophy, history, mathematics, and architecture with entirely fresh interest. Rather than simply copying these classical ideas, Renaissance thinkers adapted them to address the challenges of their own time. You can see this vividly in Raphael's painting on the screen, the Parnassus, which beautifully blends myth and dynamic modern style. Ancient knowledge became the actual foundation for new achievements in art, science, and politics, creating a vital bridge between the ancient and modern worlds. Now, let's talk about the real engine behind the Renaissance, which was money. Specifically, patronage. Art wasn't just made for fun. It was funded by wealthy merchants, rulers, and the church. On the left, we have the main man himself, Lorenzo de' Medici. He was basically the venture capitalist of the 1400s, throwing money at artists to outbuy his neighbors. By commissioning these massive pieces, patrons gave artists the financial room to breathe, experiment, and create masterpieces. It turns out that a healthy dose of wealthy rivalry is actually great for art history. With all that money flowing in, artists started transforming European art by observing nature like actual scientists. They applied math to invent linear perspective, and they studied anatomy very closely, sometimes by secretly dissecting bodies at night just to figure out how muscles actually look under skin. Look at the image in the middle. Da Vinci's Virgin of the Rocks. Notice how the light softly fades into the dark shadows. That's called chiaroscuro and sfumato, which made paintings look misty, lifelike, and deeply realistic. On the right, Raphael's portrait of a young man looks so detailed and natural. It's almost like, he's about to blink and ask you why you're staring at him. And that brings us to one of the biggest mic drop moments in art history, Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper, painted between 1495 and 1498. Now, this isn't just a holy dinner scene. It is an absolute masterclass in mathematical perspective. If you draw lines from the ceiling panels and windows, they all converge perfectly right at Christ's right eye. Leonardo designed it so that your eyes are completely forced to look exactly where he wants them to look. Plus, look at the drama. He captured the exact second Jesus says, "One of you will betray me," and everyone is reacting like, "Wait, what? Is it me? Is it him?" It's pure theatrical reality captured on a wall. Moving right along, we can't talk about the masters without mentioning the absolute titans of the era. Leonardo da Vinci, the ultimate Renaissance man who did everything from painting to engineering, and Michelangelo, the absolute master of sculpture. On the left, you have the Mona Lisa. She's world famous for that mysterious smile, which honestly looks like she knows a secret about you and isn't telling. And in the center, we have a close-up of Michelangelo's David. Look at the detail in the brow and the sheer realism in the muscles, all carved out of a single block of solid marble. These masters perfectly combined raw artistic skill with meticulous scientific observation, completely setting a brand new standard for human beauty. Next up, we have science and innovation, where people finally decided to study nature through actual observation and experimentation rather than just relying on old beliefs. Scholars started questioning everything, from engineering to astronomy and the human body. On the far left, we see Leonardo da Vinci's sketches for his aerial screw from the late 1480s, proving he was dreaming up helicopters centuries before they were actually a thing. Moving to the center, we have Andreas Vesalius's famous book from 1543, where he revolutionized medicine by closely examining human anatomy. And right next to it, Nicolaus Copernicus dropped his heliocentric model in that very same year, proving that the Earth revolves around the sun, and not the other way around. These thinkers completely laid the foundation for the modern scientific world. And how did all these revolutionary ideas spread so quickly across Europe? Well, welcome to the printing revolution. Around 1450, Johannes Gutenberg invented the movable type printing press, and it completely changed the game. Before this, copying a single book took months of tedious handwriting, but suddenly, they could be reproduced rapidly, making learning way more accessible and affordable. On the screen, you can see illustrations of early 16th century print shops right next to an older, hand-painted medieval manuscript. This single 15th century innovation caused literacy to boom, universities to expand, and civilization literally never looked back. It was basically the Renaissance version of inventing the internet. Next up, we hit the absolute peak of the whole movement, the High Renaissance, flourishing between roughly 1490 and 1527. This was the era when artists completely perfected things like math-based perspective, anatomy, and balanced compositions to hit a level of realism that was, honestly mind-blowing. On the left and center, we have Leonardo da Vinci's masterpieces, Lady with an Ermine and Salvator Mundi, showcasing that insane technical skill, soft lighting, and lifelike emotion. On the right is Raphael's incredible work, The Transfiguration, from 1520, which is a masterclass in massive theatrical drama and perfect composition. Along with Michelangelo, these absolute titans defined the ultimate ideals of beauty and human creativity, setting a gold standard that basically changed the art world forever. So, Renaissance architecture was basically a deliberate reboot. Instead of the pointy, chaotic Gothic style, architects in Florence looked back at ancient Rome and got completely obsessed with math, symmetry, and perfect proportions. They wanted clean lines. Think domes, columns, and arches. For example, Bramante's Tempietto on the left is a perfect circular mini-temple built right where St. Peter was crucified. Then you have the Certosa di Pavia at the bottom, showcasing that flawless, mirrored symmetry. And finally, the Florence Baptistery on the right. That's actually the exact building Brunelleschi studied to crack the code on linear perspective. As Renaissance ideas spread north of Italy, they developed a distinct style focused on education, religious reform, and the careful study of nature. Northern artists in Germany and the Netherlands became famous for their incredible attention to detail, mastery of oil painting, and interest in capturing everyday life alongside traditional religious subjects. For instance, Jan van Eyck's The Arnolfini portrait showcases this incredible precision in texture and lighting, capturing the life of an Italian merchant in Bruges. Meanwhile, Peter Bruegel the Younger's The Adoration of the Magi in the Snow blends a biblical scene directly into a freezing, ordinary Northern European village. Ultimately, while Italy focused on classical grandeur, the Northern Renaissance excelled at reflecting the real, detailed world of everyday people. Honestly, it kind of became a victim of its own perfection. Eventually, artists felt that they had achieved maximum harmony and symmetry, which led them to start experimenting with much more dramatic, elongated, and stylized forms that eventually shifted into the next major art movements. At the same time, shifting political alliances and economic struggles across Europe meant that the massive funding required for these grand, sprawling projects began to wind down. Yet, even though the era itself drew to a close, its enduring legacy is still very much alive all around us. So as the camera tilts up to take in these final breathtaking views, it serves as a powerful reminder that looking upward and aiming for something legendary is a pursuit that permanently changed the course of history.